One is a public hearing, and it's a resolution on the Community Development Block Grant Program, and we'd like to have a staff report on that to start that off.
Good evening, and I am going to be filling in tonight. My name is Brad Clark. I'm with the Community Development Department, and normally you hear from Ann Ingalls on Community Development Block Grant items, but as you know, we got some of the white stuff today, and she is unable to be here, so I'm going to ask for your patience as we kind of work through this, and I will do my best to answer any questions you might have. The first slide here is not actually the same slide as what's in the council's packet tonight. I asked Ann if she could put a slide that shows the council all of the project partners with the Community Development Block Grant Program. It's a really when you see it all listed, and that's on page 2 of your handout. I just didn't have it in my on the slide for the public tonight, but you see about a dozen community partners listed there, and it's just exciting to see, you know, the impacts that some of this funding is able to have for folks. We received a letter. I think it was just late last week from one of those partners, and that's Rebuilding Together Rogue Valley. This is actually one of the newer sub-recipients under the Community Development Block Grant Program. They have not done a lot of working grants past before. They're based in Jacksonville, and the executive director is David Doy, and we will if it wasn't on the dais, which I don't think it is tonight, we will get this to you because I think it's just a really nice testimony to the program. But one paragraph that I just wanted to point out before we go through the comprehensive plan tonight is, he said that we recently completed a 17-foot wheelchair ramp using CDBG funds. It was for an elderly veteran residing in Grants Pass. He is wheelchair bound, and his wife, who is also elderly and suffers her own mobility hurdles, has been helping him navigate the front steps in and out of the home. This is a major fall risk for both the client and wife. In addition, when the wife was not home, the client had no way to safely leave the home. We were able to build and install an ADA compliant ramp that eliminated these dangers. After installation, they were so overjoyed, they sent a thank you note that joked that they would be doing wheelies down the ramp. Included in the same note was, thank you, awesome people. The world needs more folks like you. So I think that's a good way to start. So what we are talking about tonight is the Community Development Block Grant. We are reporting back to you and to the community on program year, which is what the PY stands for at the slide there, program year 2020-2021. And as the council may recall, the CDBG program is built on 5-year consolidated plan, but within that 5 years, you have to report back on each year individually. So tonight is the report on the first year of our second 5-year program. And tonight's hearing is basically to acknowledge what we'll refer to as the CAPER, or the Comprehensive Annual Performance and Evaluation Report for that year 2020 and 2021. And the citizen participation plan that the Housing and Urban Development, HUD, requires has a requirement for a public hearing each year, and that's what we're doing here tonight. And the relationship to your council goals, there's several of them there listed on the screen that relate to the goals in the strategic plan. So these program activities for this program year began slowly in 2020 due to the effects of the pandemic right at the beginning there in 2020. We did get 2 tranches of CARES Act funds. That was a separate money that came to the City of Grants Pass as a entitlement community for community development block grants, which was also expended and reported out here tonight as well. So with the COVID-19 funds, there were 10 activities accepted with 5 new activities and 4 regular activities. And all recipients of these COVID-19 funds, but 2, expended their awards by September 30, 2021. So for the regular program in that year that we're reporting on tonight, there was $374,611 in regular funding. The expenditures, there's $209,012 that were expended in that time period. $411,035 of COVID-19 funds, and then more COVID-19 funds were expended after the close of of program year 2020. So that brings us to expending 97% of the funds. And as I think you all know, as counselors, the source of this money is the federal U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And the primary objective of this program is to develop viable urban communities by expanding economic development opportunities and providing decent housing and suitable living environment. And there's a national objective that we always like to be reminded of, that this program is to benefit low and moderate income persons, to eliminate blight and other urgent community need that poses serious and immediate threats to health and welfare. So all of the program activities need to tie into that national objective. So a few highlights from this program year. 49 persons were saved from eviction or loss of utilities. 34 youths were supported by the Boys and Girls Club distance learning. 414 homeless youths were provided services by the Maslow Project and Hearts with a Mission. That was primarily with COVID-19 funds. And then 15,100 individuals provided a week's supply of shelf-stable meals, and that's through the Rogue Valley Community of Governments. There was also 109 victims of domestic violence that were supported through the Women and Child program. The 9 individuals recently released from incarceration were supported by Welcome Home Oregon. 6,325 supported by Options with their telehealth outreach and other services. And then the YMCA was able to continue providing a daycare program. They were really one of the first and primary ones after the pandemic hit that were able to gear up and provide a place for daycare in the community. As we already mentioned, certainly the COVID-19 provided some challenges to the implementation of the program, resulting in the inability to expend some of those regular funds. 15% cap on public services. So this is of all the monies that we receive through this program, only 15% can go to public services, which is most of our nonprofits. That's the part of the money that they get. So the bulk of the money is reserved and set aside for for housing, for microenterprise programs, other things that we do programmatically that are not a direct operation or a direct service. They involve capital, they involve improving sidewalks and ramps and things like that. So the full report is provided in your packets tonight. There's a lot more detail there. The call to action is tonight. This is the last night of the public hearing process for this program year report. It closes tonight after you, Councilor King, close the hearing. At that point, the council is required to hold a final public hearing, which we're doing, and then a recommended motion is there. And then we as staff would report back to HUD as part of this process. So that's all I have as staff, and then I think you want to open it for the public.
Thank you, Brad. With that, are there any questions from councilors? Valerie.
Yes, Brad, thank you, and I hope Ann is home and safe. I just had a question back when you were talking about the resources, the total amount of resources. You said that our regular funding is the $374,611, and I don't know, it's in one of the slides. Yeah, there it is right there. Got it. So the regular activities that we would normally have done came to $209,000, and then the COVID-19 funds, is that an extra $411,000 that we got through COVID funds?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's in addition to the regular allotment that we receive from HUD for our, our regular community development block grant.
Okay, and that was just for COVID relief during the pandemic. And then the other question I just wanted clarified was that in this particular case, during this time, they also waived the service part. Is that correct? So we were able to use that in order to, like the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA for services, and normally that would not be the case. Am I correct?
I believe that is correct, Councilor. I don't have the rule in front of me, but for that COVID money, there were some waivers that were given. Now, how much of the 15% was, I would have to rely on.
I'm just referring back to where it said then under the challenges, it says 15% cap on public services was waived by HUD for the years 2019 and 2020 due to pandemic. So I guess my point is, and that I'm trying to question is that in the future, we won't always be getting these funds that we were able to get through the pandemic. So we will not have the ability to perhaps give as much to, say, the Boys and Girls Club and to the YMCA. So I just wanted that clarified.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And I think it was truly a blessing, under this situation, and I'm so glad that we spent it like we did. It was money well spent. But I wanted clarification on that that's considered public service. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
So this is a public hearing, and this is your local city government. So are there any comments from the public? If so, come on up concerning this topic.
Hello, my name is Greg Earl. I usually come in here for the comment section on this part of it, and I just wanted to say thank you from the Boys and Girls Club for your support this last year. Those 296 kids, that money you're talking about, largely was during the COVID when it first broke out, and all those kids were mostly essential workers. Almost 90% of them were parents that had to work, who couldn't stop working, like Safeway, or those companies that just couldn't shut down, nurses and the fire department, police department. You guys made that possible. And not only that, we were able to do that for free. We just started doing back to $30 a month, which is still nothing, but we were able to, because of you, we were able to serve a lot of kids and a lot of families. And without that, you guys really saved us. And you saved a lot of people in that community. So you guys, you don't get thanked enough, but I'm telling you, thank you very, very much. And I know those 296 families were very thankful. So, yeah, thank you very much. Any questions? Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you for what you do. Any other public comments?
Hello, I'm in place of Tony today from Hearts with a Mission. I just also wanted to thank you guys for the funds you gave to us. He wanted me to mention that we finally got a new patio cover for the kiddos in the back. So we were able to get that done so we could put the barbecue under it and teach the kids how to use a grill, which is really nice. And we do some meditation out there with the kiddos on the back patio. Since we have gotten the TLP, which is the Transitional Living Center for Hearts at the Mission, we house 18 to 22-year-olds who are either homeless runaway youth or youth exiting foster care. We have given 4,797 cumulative days of service to the kiddos since February when we opened, when you add them all up together. And 1,706 of those are shelter nights. So we just wanted to thank you guys for that. But yeah, any questions about Hearts at all? Okay, yeah.
I have a question. Is it full at this point in time? Have you been able to keep
We've
it
been
pretty
running
full?
about 86% capacity.
Okay.
So we try to keep a couple rooms open. A lot of times we get DHS calls where they have an emergency placement and they're like, hey, we're in Coos, but also there's no rooms open. So we try to keep a couple beds open for them.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Uh-huh. Thanks, guys.
It's kind of nice to see people that actually do the work. So thank you for the work that you do. Okay, any more public comments before we move on? Okay, we turn it back to the council then for a discussion. Is there any discussion before we have a motion? Vanessa?
I just have the motion. I do move to accept the draft program year 2020 CAPER and authorize its submittal to Housing and Urban Development.
Valerie seconds. Vanessa, how do you vote?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, motion passed. So we want to make sure that's clear.
DJ's online also.
What's that?
DJ. I'll vote yes as well.
Oh, DJ, yeah. Hey, welcome, DJ. Good grief, okay. Okay, our next one is a quasi-judicial matter. And I got a bunch of things I need to read here and make sense out of, so I'll try to do that quickly, but in an understandable fashion. At this time, I will open the public hearing to consider an application filed by Daniel Wilson. The application is for a property line vacation. We will begin the hearing with a staff report, and it will be followed by a presentation by the applicant. Statements by persons in favor of the application, statements by people in opposition to the application, and an opportunity for additional comments by the applicant and staff. After that has occurred, the public comment portion will be closed, and the matter will be discussed and acted on by the council. The next thing we need to talk about is any objections to the jurisdiction of the council. Does anyone here present who wishes to challenge the authority of the council to hear this matter? Okay, I don't see anybody that objects. Do any councilors wish to abstain from participating in this hearing or declare a potential conflict of interest? Don't see any. Prior ex parte contacts. Are there any counselors who wish to disclose discussions, contacts, or other ex parte information they have received prior to this meeting regarding the application? Explanation of criteria then for us to make a decision. In this hearing, the decision of the council will be based upon specific criteria which are set forth in the development code. All testimony which apply in this case are noted in the staff report. If you would like a copy of the report, please write that on a note to the city manager, Aaron, and one will be provided to you. It is important to remember that if you fail to raise an issue with enough detail to afford the council and the other parties an opportunity to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. So you need to either raise your objections or lose your appeal rights. The staff report. So now we'll proceed with a report from the staff, and it's the Honorable Brad again.
Thank you, Councilor King, members of the council. This property line vacation is located on the southwest Spruce Street. This is on the north side of the Rogue River, over really close to the wastewater treatment plant. And so the request is related to the property that's highlighted here on the right side of the screen on Southwest Spruce Street. There are 2 vacant lots today that are adjacent to each other that are not built out. There is an existing lot line that they were originally platted to have single-family houses on each lot. And this is how the property appears today. The proposed lot line is pretty much right in the middle between these 2 fences that are shown on the right and left side of the photo. So, and here's how the property appears on the assessor's map. 308 and 309, each of them is 0.17 acres in size. So if it's approved tonight, they would result in a 0.34 acre parcel. Those are the 2 criteria that you mentioned, and staff has done an analysis. We don't find that either one of these criterion would be violated if you approve this. There is no cost implication for the city. The call to action, you have a 120-day deadline on this type of application, March 18th. You could approve as proposed. If you chose to deny, you would need to provide reasons, and there is a recommended motion for you.
Thank you, Brad. So our next one here, would the applicant please come forward and make their presentation if they're here? Or is the applicant here? So I don't see that happening. Okay, is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of the application? Okay, is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to the application? Okay, no final comments by the applicant, no final comments by the appellant. Staff has their final comments, which is a recommended motion. So now it's time for public portion is now closed and the matter is before the council. So any discussion? Honorable Brian.
Thanks, Joel. I move to approve the ordinance vacating the property line between tax lots 308 and 309 of map number 36-05-19-BC, first reading.
Valerie seconds that. So the motion has been put forth and seconded. Brian, how do you vote?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Honorable Rob?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
I guess I need to vote too. I put on my hat when I vote. Okay. Yes.
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 Okay. Motion passes.
I'm here too, Joel.
Oh, DJ, geez, I tell you, out of sight, out of mind. Go ahead, DJ.
It's okay, I vote yes, thank you.
Julie will read it.
Okay, ready?
Yes.
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass vacating the common property lines between tax lots 308 and 309 of map number 36-05-19-BC.
Vanessa and then Valerie.
We have the same idea in mind. I move to adopt the ordinance vacating the common property line between tax lots 308 and 309 of map number 36-05-19-BC and have it read by title only, second reading.
Second.
Seconded by Valerie. Vanessa, how do you vote?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. DJ?
Yeah.
Valerie?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay.
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass vacating the common property lines between tax lots 308 and 309 of map number 36-05-19-BC.
Okay, we're now moving on to our next agenda item, which is under the heading of council action. And we have 4 items for council action tonight. The first one is a potential resolution forming a Caveman Plaza task force. And Brad, you are the star tonight. This is your 3rd straight presentation.
And final. Yes, so I think the council's pretty familiar with this particular item. We've had it before you a couple of times now. The purpose of this item tonight is to actually formally put together and formulate the task force that would be focused on redevelopment of the Caveman Plaza property. So the relationship to your council goals is to encourage economic opportunities, and there is an objective 1 and an action 1. Particularly action 1 is to explore urban renewal agency opportunities for Caveman Plaza. So this is a 3-star priority in your current 2021 strategic plan. The Plaza is a multi-tenant building. It's located at the northeast corner of Southwest 4th and G. There are about 10 active tenants there today, and the property is owned by BB Holdings OR2 LLC, who is represented or has been represented to date by Travis Boersma. And the redevelopment potential of the site was discussed at the July 26th and November 22 workshops. So the urban renewal area plan adopted in 2016 has the Project 12, which is specific to this property. And it talks about utilizing urban renewal resources to investigate and to look into redevelopment incentives using the $1 million that is allocated in that plan to create some incentives for redevelopment. Mr. Boersma did attend the November 22 workshop and generally supported the idea of forming a task force. He did add that he wouldn't be participating in the task force due to conflict of interest, but is willing to consider a future partnership with the city of Grants Pass. He also made point at that November 22 meeting that the building has some deferred maintenance and that will need to be addressed soon and some kind of solutions identified. So what's on the screen is potential composition of what that task force would be comprised of. The Chamber of Commerce, Josephine County, etc. This was listed in your packet, and I think our goal with staff was just to try to identify a good cross-section of the community who would be considered, at least on the outset, stakeholders in a significant redevelopment project like this. So no individuals at this point have been identified. We rather just wanted to present to the council general areas in the community who might want to be represented. The two on the bottom were actually not in the packet, but in talking to Elaine Howard, who has been the city's urban renewal area consultant, were two that, in her experience from working in other communities on similar type redevelopment projects, she thought would also be good additions. So that's an architect, landscape architect, some other design professional who would be able to bring that design background to the group. And then housing, that particularly if there's some potential to have a mixed-use project there that would maybe have a housing element in it. So some of the things that council talked about at that November meeting, you did say you wanted to kind of set that framework for what this task force would be. That wasn't formally done at the November 22 meeting, but a couple of councilors did make some comments about what you'd like to see. And these are in alignment with some of the work that we've done in other communities, that I've done as well. So what is some of the advantages and disadvantages of future property ownership? Should there be an assumption that the Urban Renewal Agency would take on ownership or a private party? Off-street parking, a significant issue that's been addressed many times in the downtown core area, having that be a part of the discussion with this task force. As well as potential funding arrangements and partnerships. What's the kind of range of approaches that could be taken to redevelop the property, and investigate some of those and present those at the end of the task force. And this maybe should have been first, but what's the long-term vision for how the site will function in the historic district? the scale of the existing building, of a redeveloped building, of landscaping, parking, some of those other elements and how they relate to that historic district core there. So next steps and timeline, if approved, the task force is expected to meet multiple times over an approximately 6-month period in 2022 and hold meetings that are open to the public where they could attend and listen. How exactly that looks like and what the format for what that would look like, I think the council indicated in November that could be up to the task force, exactly how they want to do that. But they would be open to the public. And then we would anticipate a follow-up workshop expected to sort of finalize the scope. The prior slide here, only just kind of has some very broad elements. I think the task force will probably need a little bit more scope in terms of what exactly is it that they are expected to bring back to the council. And we could utilize Elaine Howard to help work through that scoping. She has stated that she's willing to attend one of your workshops to do that. And then, of course, advertising and recruiting for the task force members. And then, depending on the final scope, an external task force facilitator who has experience in urban redevelopment would be anticipated. At this point, Community Development Department, because of the goal of this to be fairly tight in time frame and to do it well and to be very focused on this and to help guide that group, we would anticipate needing to do that. This slide shows just a couple of the resources that could be potentially used. Under the Development Planning Services section of our FY22 budget, we do have approximately $45,000 balance in the professional services area. There's also the Urban Renewal Agency budget, which has resources that may potentially be able to be used. And there is no call to action date other than what I mentioned earlier, that because of the statements made by Mr. Boersma before, that in order to get this moving might be a benefit to him and to their LLC. So you really have the alternatives to approve the resolution or make some amendments. It's up to the council at this point.
Thank you, Brad. Any questions for Brad before we have discussion? Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. One of the slides was talking about the 6-month timeline for the task force, and would it be fair to assume that, going into January, we're going to need to have another workshop and we're going to need to accept applications and form the task force and do a lot of upfront work. So, by the time we're actually getting results from the task force, I would assume it'd probably be like Q4 next year, maybe late Q3. Would that be a fair assessment?
I do. I think that's fair and realistic. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a question about, because you're right, there are 2 more on this, and on the recommendation there was a 12 maximum. So, I mean, because I agree that it would be great to have the architect and design professional on there as well as housing. So does that mean we should set it at 14? I mean, or does it matter if we can make that decision afterwards?
Oh, yes. No, that's
okay.
Completely council decision on that.
Okay.
You're right. I think in the packet we may have put max, so that may have been a carryover from a prior one. But the efficiency of the task force is all kind of directly correlated to the number of people in some respects. So depending on who's facilitating them. Mm-hmm. But there does seem to be some proven truth over the years with task forces that start to reach those bigger numbers. But no, that 12 is not set in stone.
Okay. And then my other question was, because you talked about Elaine Howard coming, will she be at these meetings or will she just be at a workshop to guide us, to give them direction? I'm just curious as to if we know how that's going to work.
Well, from community development, I think our thought was that she would just be the consultant at the front end to kind of help establish the framework for it. We have not spoken to her about her availability or her willingness to participate in the actual group. I think she may be more of a resource to the task force than a member.
Okay.
That would be my own thought.
Okay, thank you.
Brian?
So we are not finalizing these members or these categories of membership tonight, correct? Or are we?
Well, I think, it's up to the council. We would be able to proceed with, some advertising. If you adopted the resolution tonight, I think we would want to have those in order to actually begin the process of recruitment. So it's, the scope of the committee, I guess, is what I was getting at in the earlier slide, not so much the membership. I do think that, probably you would want to have another workshop on the scoping of the task force, but it's up to you if you want to have more discussion about the membership.
Okay, I see. Thank you. I just had a question about the potential membership of Josephine County. Is that Josephine County government? Is that a citizen that lives in the county? I was just looking for clarification.
Sure. Yeah, it was really kind of intended to be a broader, category, not necessarily government, but because of the Urban Renewal Agency and the Josephine County being one of those 7 or 8 taxing districts that is affected by that, there may be some benefit to having them represented because of that.
Okay, so just to be clear, it would probably be someone in the Josephine County governmental organization?
Yeah, I mean, in order to get feedback related to the urban renewal piece, that would be anticipated. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Rob, you have any questions?
Thanks, Joel. So I had thoughts for discussion, but I can come up with one question. So the transportation, what does that actually refer to?
Well, for a lot of redevelopment projects, how the building relates to the sidewalk, to bike lanes, to parking, to bus stops, usually is a pretty kind of key issue. And so it's a very broad category, but I think it's referring to someone who either has experience with planning the transportation elements around, a downtown, larger, office, mixed-use type building, who can kind of help think through some of those issues that are typically the challenges that come up with putting those buildings in downtown. So it was intended to be that type of individual, not necessarily the parking, which I don't know if that's where you were going with that question, Counselor, but it was.
No, I was just wondering, since we don't, to my knowledge, have a transportation expert on our city staff, I was just wondering what you had in mind when you wrote down transportation, what type of person is going to fill that slot?
Right, and yeah.
So I'm top spinning it back into your court.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would just like to add, we actually do have a Citizens Advisory Committee as part of our Metropolitan Planning Organization. And I think there's 4 or 5 people in the community that are on that Transportation Citizen Advisory. So there is access to that in our community.
Okay, let's move on to discussion. DJ. Oh, public comment, excuse me. Any comments from the public on this? Bill?
My poor wife has listened to me for years talk about this site. the dream I've had forever is tearing down the plaza, moving it forward, leaving it far enough off the street so that you can have restaurants with open seating, parking garage behind on the post office side, brick fronts to match the other side of the street. Multi-million dollar project, but boy, would it add to downtown.
Thank you, Bill. Any other public comments? It's great to think about the future. It's nice to dream. Okay, discussion. Rob and then Valerie.
So it's been touched on a couple times, but one of the reasons that Travis mentioned that this project is a little bit time sensitive is that he figures that the deferred maintenance that he's been essentially putting off there with the repaving of the parking lot and the roof and so forth is he's going to have to make decisions on that within a year or so. So that's why, you know, this is a time sensitive thing, and I think that's why Brian was smart to bring up, you know, realistically, how long is this process going to take us by the time we fill the positions and so forth. So, you know, I look at this list of possible members and the different areas of expertise they might bring, but because we've seen in the past, now because this is, as Bill Lovelace mentions, because this is a multi-million dollar project, we're probably going to have a lot of people come out of the woodwork that want to have some input. But what we've seen in a lot of different past task forces, and I've been on several, both county and city, very often we don't get that many people applying. And I would like to see that, you know, we not re-advertise several times and drag it on several months by doing that. But I would like to, and I know we're not deciding this tonight, but I just like to throw that out there, is that I see the community at large position. If we can't find, you know, 12 or 14 different specific people to fill these different areas, I would like to expand it out to, you know, more community at large positions, just so that we can fill the seats so we can move it forward. If we have too small of a group, yes, it'll be very efficient, but it can also be led in a very narrow direction that would be just what that particular narrow group of people might want. So I would just like us to consider when we do our future workshop or whatever we're going to do on it, potentially more community at large positions if we can't fill these others in the interest of expediency, so we can fill it, get it going, and get it moving with those people who are interested, whether or not there could be, you know, 2 really qualified real estate people or 2 really qualified transportation experts or whoever it is, and rather than close them out and have to pigeonhole them into one position, I'd like to have more community at large positions to make sure we can fill the seats and have a broad range of input.
Thank you, Rob. Valerie? Oh, Rick, go ahead.
I agree with Rob. I like that perspective because I see where this needs to move forward, and the suggestions that Rob made would allow that flexibility. Thank you.
So basically, I was going to move ahead and move to approve the resolution creating the Cave-In Plaza Task Force with a maximum of 14. And I think by putting the maximum, that's maximum, it doesn't have to be that. But I agree, and I don't know how to get it in a timely manner. But I'm going to move to approve the resolution creating the Cave-In Plaza Task Force with a maximum of 14 members and direct staff to advertise.
Got a second by Rob. Valerie, how do you
Joel,
vote?
can we open for
discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah.
I gotta sleep tonight. So thank you, Brian.
Sure. Yeah, I support the task force. It's, as people have said, it's probably a tens of millions of dollar project. And we don't know what it looks like at this point. But just so everyone knows, one result of the task force could be us not doing anything. So I just want to make sure that everyone doesn't think that this means we're absolutely doing something with the plaza. We're just looking at doing something with the plaza. Thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, I really appreciate, Brian, you making that clarification. I think the last time we spoke about this, you know, I think I did say that we either need to decide if we're going to act on it, or we need to decide if we're going to pull it off our priorities list. And that would be an okay result of this task force as well, that we've decided we're going to pull it off our priorities list. But I really appreciate you making that very clear. That is one of the objectives here, for us to decide if we're going to do anything. Yeah.
DJ, do you have any thoughts for us? Collective wisdom?
No, thank you, not at this point.
Okay. Any other points? We do have a motion on the floor. Any other points of discussion? Is there a second to the motion? Rob, second to the motion, that's right. Okay, Valerie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well.
Joel, can I make one more quick comment?
You sure can.
I just wanted to just say that as the task force is working through their process this year, I hope that we as a council can also continue to move forward and work on other urban renewal projects, and that all of the urban renewal effort isn't focused on this. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point, Brian. The other thing, just to clarify for staff, what I heard the council talk about, the timeline may be a little longer than this. It may not be, but it looks like the task, if it does take a little longer, that we're looking at a 14 max, possibly instead of a 12. Elaine Howard is going to come back to us at a workshop and help us gather some focus items for the task force to address. And part of what Rob talked about needs to address some of the maintenance items or the buildings that have some need there. And we can fill out, if we don't get enough applicants, that we can have more community at large people. And the Josephine County membership, if I understood that conversation directly, would be a member of the government. Is that correct? Okay. Okay, so any corrections to that before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, let me put my glasses on. Mr. Madhu here. Okay, our next council action item is a resolution adopting a new emergency shelter application form and fee to implement and administer. Brad.
I lied last time. I forgot that I had another item. So the subject here is adoption of a new temporary application that would be used by the city, outlining locally required steps and materials needed to apply for an emergency shelter. And this is all coming out of House Bill 2006-A, which was a bill passed in this last full session in Salem. And it has some very specific wording in there related to emergency shelters. And we have given the council a couple months ago a memo which contained more of the language in that law, which gives you a little bit more context. I didn't include that tonight. But the purpose of that House Bill 2006-A really was to essentially bypass the local land use process for emergency shelters for a period of time that is currently set to sunset July 1st, 2022. And anyone who comes forth with an application to have an emergency shelter underneath this, we wanted to have a local process. What does that look like? And so that's really the purpose of this resolution tonight, is to get that local process set up and established so it's clear and consistent with that House bill. The relationship to your council goal is to enhance community safety as well as leadership. So as I mentioned, the bill became effective May 12th, and it did amend 3 different ORSs. Those sections are there, all relating to emergency housing. Emergency shelter in this case is defined as a building or cluster of buildings that provide shelter on a temporary basis for individuals and families who lack permanent housing. And it mandates that a local government approve an application, but it does say that you have to still comply with a few basic criteria before we apply it. It is very clear that there is no public hearing. It is very clear that that the actual zoning of the property is not to be looked at. So, but the other pieces are listed here on the bottom of the slide, and those include the shelter must have sleeping and restroom facilities. It must comply with the applicable building codes. It does need to be located in an urban growth boundary or in an area zoned for rural residential use as defined in the statutes. It can't result in the development of a new building sited in hazardous areas such as floodplains, steep slopes, wetlands, things like that, other environmentally sensitive areas, unless they comply with the regulations related to those environmental areas. It has to have adequate transportation access to commercial and medical services and cannot pose any unreasonable risk to public health and safety. So those are the stipulations that are in the bill that was passed in May. And so the question is, how do we ensure that each of those is met before an application is approved? And that's what the goal of the application is, just to kind of outline what those are. We would add some other things like an applicant name, contact information, etc. The application also, and this is from the statute, includes information to demonstrate that the operator is either a religious corporation, a public benefit corporation, or a nonprofit corporation. One of those three would have to be demonstrated in the application. We will also make it clear that the city's decision can be appealed, and that's specific to Josephine County Circuit Court. The appeals process does not go to the Land Use Board of Appeals, which is what other land use cases would. It goes through the circuit courts. And then we are recommending a fairly nominal fee, we feel, of $150 to process it, to track it, to do the reviews, and have a couple of meetings with folks as necessary. So if the minimum state standards are met, then the application would be considered complete by staff, and then the city manager or his designee would be authorized to approve the application. That piece is not required in the statute. The city council could do it, the planning commission could do it. That's up to the local jurisdiction. There's also no timeline on when the application has to be approved, interestingly enough. The statute leaves that open. It says that you don't have to decide on the application within a certain period of time. So the second bullet up here is coming from a council's conversation at the last workshop about wanting to have some type of notification. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's not a public hearing, but there seemed to be an indication from council that you wanted still some kind of notice to be sent out. And so 100 feet is what we use on other land use applications. That's also up to you if you want to see that be broader. And then, as I mentioned, the public notice would not solicit comments. It would simply state, here at this address is proposed to be this type of shelter for this type of clientele and operated by so-and-so. You know, that kind of information that would be in the notice. And this was attached to the application, to the packet, just the application that we've been talking about. No cost implication for the city on this, other than just standard staff resources. Call to action's your discretion. You could approve the form, including an administration and mailing fee, or make amendments to it, or not approve the resolution.
Any questions for Brad? Go ahead.
Thanks, Brad. So there's no time required to approve an application. That's open-ended. How long would you expect it to typically take for an application to be approved? I mean, it sounds like it'd be fairly quick.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the completeness is honestly probably the period of time that I would expect to take the longest, and that's somebody may come in with an application and we go through and say, you know, you're missing items A, D, and E, and then, you know, then they bring that back. But once all of the required items are there, you know, we're really not talking more than I would anticipate, at least from us, to do that check, you know, a few weeks.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Rob?
So I guess one of the requirements from the state bill says that the site has to have adequate transportation access to commercial and medical services. How do you figure that adequate is being defined there?
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit. It's not defined. You know, I think we would certainly look at the number of folks that would be at that facility, as well as, you know, I mean, that will trigger a lot of things. I mean, so there's going to be some discussion. That's why I think a few weeks would probably be necessary, because, you know, there's going to be dialogue and inquiry about exactly what's there, as well as the public safety piece. As you may recall, with the Manzanita shelter, the temporary shelter on Manzanita, there was conditions placed by council related to public safety and ensuring that that was addressed adequately. So I think that from our standpoint, we will, even though we're not calling it a land use application, we're still going to probably use the development code as a reference tool to at least help guide the topic as we're doing the analysis, so that, you know, we're not missing any key pieces. But at this point, you know, that's really all we have.
I guess my question or my concern was, to me, adequate, you kind of answered it a different way when you said adequate could be based on how many people, I guess how much transportation, but I was just thinking, because somebody's going to have to make the decision, whether it's you, it might be you, you know, or someone's going to make the decision whether someone's application is complete or whether, you know, complete enough. And I'm just wondering how far we would expect people in one of these facilities to be able to walk to get to transportation. You know, and I guess we don't have to decide that tonight, but we must have some idea what we're implying. How far would someone who be expected to walk to get to transportation for this to be adequate?
Right. Right, and the service provider is really key here, because, you know, whether it's a religious organization or a nonprofit or, you know, a public entity, they're going to have experience implementing similar type shelters and administering those. And so frankly, we'll rely very heavily on their recommendations and their advice. You know, I mean, a half mile is one figure that I've seen used in other communities, but then it becomes a half mile to what? And is it only a half mile to a 7-Eleven, or is it a half mile to medical, or is it, you know, I mean, there's a lot of services, but you know, since we don't have those adopted standards, I think we will rely fairly heavily on the service provider.
Okay, Rick and then Valerie.
Thank you, Brad. Could you go back to slide 4 from the background? Okay, so the third one, bullet down there, located inside urban growth boundary or an area zone rural residential use. I know that Eugene Place a lot of those in industrial areas but is there any opportunity provided by state statute to, if we had to deviate from a rural residential zone to some other zone that might be an appropriate property? To your knowledge?
I'm sorry, what was the last part of that?
Is there an ability, if there was a piece of property that was not zoned rural residential, but it was, let's say, on the city limits, and it had the building that was maybe appropriate, is there any ability within that statute to deviate from that standard?
I don't believe so. I mean, I think that sets it. It's either inside the urban growth boundary or it's zoned outside, which, I mean, I just included the statute here. The truth is that if it's outside the urban growth boundary, our intergovernmental agreement with Josephine County would say that the city doesn't have any say over it.
Okay.
Zoning doesn't matter. The threshold is merely whether it's inside or outside the UGB.
That was actually, my question was the same, similar one, and I wondered whether this meant that somebody could go out into rural residential in Josephine County as well, because it just says it is either inside an urban growth boundary, which would be inside Grants Pass, or an area zone for rural residential. So technically, somebody could go out into the county in a rural residential area and open a shelter, am I correct?
Perhaps, although I've only evaluated it vis-a-vis the city rather than outside the city. So I don't, it's speculative, but based on the sentence, the comment that you just made and looking at the language right here, located inside an urban growth boundary or in an area zone for rural residential use, probably so.
Okay,
you can certainly have RU zoning outside of UGB.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Let's have about 10 seconds of silence, so DJ or Vanessa or Kurt or anybody else have any additional questions, and then we'll move on to discussion. It never amazes me how long 10 seconds of silence seems. So do we have any public comment on this before we have discussion? Seeing none, I'll refer it back to the council for discussion. Valerie?
Well, it is a state law. I mean, basically all we're doing is putting our stamp on a law that came down from the state that is necessary, and what we're doing is putting together the application to match that law. So I would like to just go ahead and make a motion. I move to approve the resolution adopting the new emergency shelter application form to implement and administer Oregon HB 2006/A 2021, including a $150 administration fee.
Do I see a second? Second by Rob. Okay, discussion on that? Vanessa?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Councilor Lovelace, would you consider potentially amending your motion to having some type of timeline for staff to approve the application, perhaps 10 business days from date of receiving?
I don't know. I guess that kind of is up to staff. I don't know how they see it or how somebody coming forward. Does that mean that if it takes longer than 10 days that it doesn't happen? I mean, I don't know. I guess that's my question to you is, if you put a date on it and they don't have anything together within 10 days, does that mean it doesn't happen? I would like to think that it would happen in a timely manner. So I guess my question is to staff. Do you think it would take longer than that? I mean, would it make a difference if we had a timeline on it?
So we did hear from staff this evening that it would reasonably take a couple of weeks just to ensure that the application was complete and valid. My concern is that this is an emergency piece of legislation and it is only valid until July of 2022. So the service providers coming to us with these services that they're attempting to create are on the basis of emergency. So That's
So-
my reasoning for 10 business days.
Could you do 10 business days as to when their application is complete? That way that the burden is on them to put their stuff together, and as soon as that happens, then we say we'll get our part done in 10 days. I would be willing to amend that.
That's fair.
So,
Okay, so we have an amended motion. Do we have a second to that? Rob seconds it. Any more discussion? No? Valerie, how do you vote?
yes.
Rob? Vanessa?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
DJ? DJ, are you there?
Yes.
Are you voting yes? Yeah, okay. Rick?
Yes.
Also yes.
Okay. Kurt?
Yes.
I'll vote yes too. So the council has voted to approve the resolution adopting a new emergency shelter application form and fee with a timeline for after we receive a completed application of 10 working days. Was that correct? 10 working days? Okay. Okay, just for clarification. Okay, the next one is the resolution adopting the city manager's annual evaluation.
Good evening,
We have the
Chair,
city manager.
Council, members of the public. I just have a brief presentation queued up for your discussion. So subject in summary is that council has a responsibility to evaluate the city manager and provide feedback and ultimately work on goals and set a work plan by council. This supports council's goals of leadership by evaluating the city managers prescribed in the agreement. There's just a couple of points with this. We do an annual evaluation, which is performed usually in December of each year. Evaluation scores 1 to 4, with 1 being poor, 4 being excellent. City manager received a score of 3 this year. A score of 2.5 and above provides a merit step increase, and the city manager is currently at step 7 of 10. Your call to action is scheduled for today's meeting. Cost implication for alternative 1 is $4,926.11. The alternatives is 1, council can choose to approve the city manager evaluation, council can modify, or choose not to approve the evaluation. And there's a potential motion for you, council, and Chair King, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Aaron. Discussion or questions from the council first, and then we can go to discussion. Are there any questions? You want to move right to discussion? Public input, okay. Any questions? So is there anybody from the public that would like to make any comment at this point in time? It is a council action. My goodness, we have a bunch of folks here that are listening. They're good listeners. Okay, discussion. Any discussion? Rob?
Yeah, thank you. So it's just a few things that I have to say, and I'm not in a position tonight that I really want to be in a certain sense, but nonetheless I'm here. It's of my own making. We, as a council, this year's council was constrained or basically had to use evaluation form and process that other councils before us had implemented. I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but nonetheless that was the position that we were in. And the part that of this process that has me a little bit perplexed isn't the right word, but I have some consternation over it. When we started the year, the city manager was basically stepped out. He was at page 7, he was at step 7, he was at maximum, was not eligible for any more raises beyond COLAs and so forth. Or unless the council decided to give him a bonus, but he wasn't, we'll say, on a guaranteed path to a raise. And that's when we started the year. I think in October, early October, was brought to the council the concept of adding more step increases to basically help retain, I guess, senior employees that might have been stepped out. In other words, they're at the top of their range, and gives them a little more incentive to stay until retirement and so forth. That's as I understood it. And I can't recall whether it was in these chambers or whether it was in a one-on-one with Aaron, but he very much, I'm not going to say sold that idea, but he suggested that idea and pointed out the benefits of that idea as far as retaining seasoned employees. And I do not remember, and I don't believe he ever said, something along the lines of, with full transparency, if we increase the STEP program, I too will get a raise. I never remember him saying that. I never remember, the HR director specifically telling us this. And I am a little embarrassed to say that I didn't realize it. Maybe I should have realized it right away, that automatically the city manager would be affected by this extension of the STEP program, but it didn't occur to me. I thought it was a good idea for senior employees below the manager level for the reasons that were stated, but it was never made, no one went, I'll put it this way, and I'll be very certain about this. No one went out of their way to make it clear that this also made the manager eligible for raises. And when this idea was proposed, that wasn't made clear. So that is the problem I have here for a few different reasons. And I don't want to necessarily talk too long before someone else has a chance to speak, but I've always looked at many of the differences between the city manager's compensation package and the other senior managers. City manager's compensation package is quite a bit different. So that's probably why I never looked at him, or that position I should say, as being totally consistent with the way we handled other senior managers. He's got a very significant severance package, should he ever be terminated. The deferred salary that he gets, the 8%. I mean, none of the other, that's in addition to PERS. None of the other senior managers have some of these, and there's other benefits too. As far as accruing administrative leave, I think basically indefinitely. I don't think the other managers have that, but I'm not sure. So my point is that there are differences between how the manager is compensated and the structure with which he's compensated and the other senior managers. So when the STEP program was extended, it never occurred to me that automatically made the manager eligible for a raise this year. So I feel a little blindsided by that aspect of it. When I then went and looked at exactly what the manager's compensation is worth now in dollars and cents, I quite frankly I had sticker shock. I thought, and I'm not sure what it was based on, it might have been an old article in the Courier or something like that, but I kind of thought that the manager was in the $230,000 a year compensation range, roughly 160 or 170 for salary, roughly 60 or 70 for benefits. When I checked with HR, the memo that we got back was that actually the manager is currently, his total compensation is $260,000. And if he were to get the proposed raises, that would bring him up to over $270,000. And quite frankly, that just stopped me in my tracks. I just feel that in Grants Pass, that is a lot of money. And I don't necessarily feel that essentially any government employee in Josephine County should be getting that amount of compensation. So that's the problem that I have, and I don't feel that the process that we went through, I felt that everyone was heard during our evaluations. I felt that DJ ran the meeting well. I have no problem with that. I don't necessarily like some of the aspects that some of the other councils set up, but I think that it was implemented well. But essentially the 11th hour change in the STEP program that included the manager, that was never made abundantly clear. And again, it may be, maybe I should have understood that inherently, but I didn't. And so I just, I want to look at the the humanity of Aaron and any other government employees we have in Josephine County, and I try to do that. And when I forget to do it, I try to remind myself to do it, that we're all people, we're all trying to work here for a common goal. But by the same token, there's a point at which there's kind of a line in the sand for me where, and I don't feel great about it, but the fact is sometimes I have to feel like we the people have to do certain things, and they, the government, are on a different side of that line. And to give a $260,000 a year employee a raise, to me, I'm on the side of we the people. I really have a hard time siding with they, the government, and providing that raise. So I'm going to have to vote no on this process tonight. It's a convoluted way of saying it, but that's my thought process, and I'm trying to be as transparent about it as possible. Thank you.
Rick?
Rob, I hear you, and of course, you know, I've been around here 10 years and seen different things, and I can't pin down an exact date when we are aware of the step increase, but to me, that's always been out there. And one of the reasons it's been out there, if we are going to attract good talent, experienced talent to Grants Pass, we have to be competitive, at least in the state of Oregon. But the other factor that we're dealing with as well in these positions, if you give the people, the staff below, the employees below the staff position, you start having compression, and all of a sudden you can find out that there are employees below you that have much less responsibility that are being paid more, and I think that's not an appropriate position to be in. So I'm satisfied with the step increase because it helps not only retain experienced help, but attract help as people leave and retire and so forth. Thank you.
Any other comments? Rob?
Yeah, if no one else is going to comment. I hear what you're saying, Rick, but in my opinion, in this particular case, there are also at least 4 other factors where the manager gets treated in a way that is, we'll call it superior or with beneficial treatment than anyone else who's in the organization. So even if he were to make, or that person were to make the same in dollars, other people don't have a 6-month severance package, they don't have deferred salary, they don't have, all kinds of other things. And I guess when I got the memo from HR, what kind of reminded me that not only would this be raising the salary to $270,000, or I shouldn't say the salary, the total compensation, $270,000, that also is, this person also gets 10 weeks paid time off a year. And that to me just takes it over the point where I can look my constituents in the eye and say, you know what? We have a $260,000 a year employee who gets 10 weeks paid time off a year, and this person really needs another raise. I just can't do it. And maybe you can do it, and maybe others on the council can do it. And I I wish it was more simple for me, but there's a point at which I just have to say, I just have to draw that line and say, I just don't believe that we the people would approve that. And that's who I'm speaking for.
Valerie?
Yeah, I'm just going to say that something we didn't do this year that we've done in years past and is the compensation of other city managers throughout the state. And we only do it, I guess, now every, 3 years, I don't know how it changed. But honestly, when you look at the going rate for city managers, they have a lot of responsibility and they have a lot of training. And I understand that is a lot of money, but I will also say I don't think I've ever gone down and seen my city manager not there and available for me and take that 10 weeks off. I know that he does take, some of his personal time to do the coaching part of it, but he's been there and he is there when we need them. And I do believe that if you look at the compensation, that's how this is built. It's no different than when we look at the, what they do the judging for the fire chief, for the police chief, or anybody. They look at compensation around the state because you really do have to compete with other people to get good people. So, we may have a low median income and we may have a lot of people that don't make that kind of money, but I really do believe if you're going to keep quality people, you need to give them what they would be getting somewhere else in order to keep them here. So I think I've sat through enough of these evaluations where I do see what the compensation is in the other parts of the state. And so it gives me a better understanding of what it does take to retain a city manager.
Brian?
Yeah, I appreciate hearing all the perspectives. I think I agree with just about everything Rob explained. When we did that salary adjustment earlier this year and increased the steps, I too am a little bit embarrassed to say that it didn't dawn on me that would also apply to the city manager. I thought that process would be a part of the evaluation process, and as far as I remember, it wasn't made clear in a meeting or to me personally that it would be happening as part of that larger group. So the other thing I wanted to say about the evaluation itself is, and it was in one of these slides, is it says that if the manager receives a score over 2.5, he should automatically get a raise. And I personally think on a scale of 1 to 4, 2.5 is a pretty low bar to hit. A 2.5 is kind of like a C. So in the future, maybe sometime this year we can, if people have ideas of how to hone this process a little bit more, I think that would be one of the things that I would want to look at. For someone running the city organization, I would think that maybe a 3 out of 4 would be more appropriate for getting an automatic raise, but yeah, I just wanted to make those comments. Thank you.
Valerie?
Okay, and I'm going to move to approve the city manager's annual evaluation.
Okay, do we have a second? Got a second by Rick. Valerie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob?
No.
Vanessa?
For reasons that Councillor Pell had outlined, I'll abstain.
Okay, Brian?
No.
DJ?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes?
Kurt?
Yes.
I'll vote yes, along with the comments. I worked with the federal government which maybe not be a good example, Rob, because they follow the same pay scale. They have 10 steps. The one thing I think that we'd want to look at in the future is the longer a person is with an organization, the greater the period it is between steps. And to address Brian's point, at least with the federal government, you get the step unless you have an unsatisfactory performance. That's what I'm used to in the bureaucracy of the federal government now. That doesn't mean we have to do that with the city. That's just how it works. But but as you try to retain senior employees, at least what the federal government does is put a 3 years between the automatic steps rather than 2. And it starts off at 1 and then goes to 2 years and then 3 years, but regardless. So anyway, Vanessa, help me, if I remember the votes right, that the motion passed to approve the rating, is that correct? Okay. Okay. On to the next one. Resolution regarding awarding a request for proposals to develop affordable housing on surplus land, known as, surplus land is kind of an oxymoron, known as the Southwest Ramsey property to Christian Development Incorporated. Do we have a presentation? We do.
First, yes, we do, but Joel, first of all, I just need to tell you at this point, I need to recuse myself. I need to recuse myself from this because I personally have a stake in it. So I'll just kind of sit back and let the rest of you make the decision.
Thank you, Valerie. That was very respectful of you.
All right, so,
Pardon me for a moment. Councilor Lovelace, if you're recusing yourself, can you please come to the audience? Thank you.
okay. So we do have, we put out a request for proposal for affordable housing. And that was after the performance audit, visioning and enhancement, PAVE committee work in 2019 had identified the Southwest Ramsey parcel as surplus property. So the Housing Advisory Committee recommended that this 1.89 acre parcel be used to help address the city's affordable housing needs. The community development prepared and published a request for proposals on October 14th of this year. And we received 3 qualified proposals. In relationship to council goals, this supports the council's goal to provide cooperative shared leadership involving council, staff, and community, and facilitates sustainable, manageable growth by encouraging an environment which provides for the growth of affordable housing opportunities to be met or to meet the diversity of Grants Pass residents' needs. This also meets the Comprehensive Plan Goal 9, which is to encourage the provision of adequate numbers of housing units within the urban growth boundary at price ranges and rent levels commensurate with the financial capabilities of area households, and to allow for flexibility of housing type, density, location, and design. This is a refresher of the evaluation criteria that we had put in the RFP would be utilized. So if you have any questions or want me to go deeper into any of these criteriums, they were weighted slightly as well. Okay, and here's a refresher of the timeline for the RFP process. The subcommittee met on December 3rd and selected Chrisman Development Incorporated, partnering with Oslin Group, Lovelace Development, and Josephine Housing and Community Development Council as the preferred developer of the Southwest Ramsey Avenue surplus property. Here are the final scorings that each proposal received from the committee. I've included here one of the sketches Chrisman Development included. Chrisman Development's proposal demonstrated the top ability to fund similar projects through combining multiple funding sources and programs. Also, by teaming up with the Josephine County Housing and Community Development Council, they've gone the extra mile to demonstrate an ability to make the greatest community impact by utilizing Section 8 project-based vouchers for 35 units, 10 of which will be an elderly set-aside. They demonstrated a commitment to sustainability by including rooftop solar, energy-efficient HVAC systems, and design materials, and by including the electric utilities in the rents of the tenants. They're also showing that they have skin in the game in terms of keeping the fixtures in the property energy efficient as well. The proposed sale price of the Southwest Ramsey Avenue property is $1,095,790, which matches the appraised value of the property. They did ask for 50% of the proceeds from the sale be sent back to development team as a long-term loan. According to the RFP timeline, once we decide tonight on official awardee, we will enter into negotiations January 3rd through 21st. And the proposal will be presented to the council on February 2nd, 2022 for consideration of approval. I do want to point out that in that negotiation time, it's important to show city buy-in on this project. That does help the developer to gain the tax credits needed to help fund this project. It is recommended to the City Council to approve the award of the request for proposals to develop 66 units of affordable housing on 1.89 acres of surplus real property known as the Southwest Ramsey Avenue property to Chrisman Development. They gave us 2 options. The reason we went with the 66 unit option is due to the extreme housing shortage and severe lack of affordable rentals in Grants Pass. So we have a potential motion and alternatives.
Okay, do you have any other additional information for us at this time? You ready to proceed?
Yes, ready to
Okay,
proceed.
okay. Are there any questions from the council to the presenter? Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Amber. So just a couple questions. The first one is, when we did this RFP before, and this was before your time, but originally this project was slated to be specifically a senior low-income housing project. And it's my understanding that this current incarnation is not that, it's just more general low-income housing. Is that accurate?
Right, we had dropped the request for a senior-specific project in favor of opening it up to families. That helps more with the workforce as well. I do want to note that there are 10 units set aside for elderly families in this unit, or in this proposal.
Okay, so was there any reason, like, is if it's a senior housing development, is it more difficult to find a developer to specialize in that, or was it just a staff level decision?
So the last request had a specific funding in mind that would set it aside as a senior, and that specific funding may not be a funding that all developers had worked with, so it just kind of narrows the responses we might receive.
Okay. And then the other question I have, and this might be answered as part of the negotiation process, but it mentions half of the proceeds from the sale being used as a long-term loan for the developer. And I couldn't find anything in here more specific about how that would work. Is that something that would be, the details would be fleshed out as part of the negotiation?
Yeah, that would definitely be part of the negotiation stage.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Honorable Vanessa.
Thank you, Amber. I understand the tax credits through Housing Community Services is a very competitive process. Do you have any recommendations that the city could potentially bring to that application to help, I guess, convince Housing Community Services of community buy-in?
To my knowledge, one of the biggest things the city can do is show buy-in through helping to incentivize the project. Sometimes cities will do a lower sale price for the land, other funds available through an affordable housing fund or other grant programs, waiver deferrals of SDCs are some of the options that have been seen, but the developer might have some suggestions as well.
Thank you.
DJ, I know you're out there. Are you there?
Yes. Yes.
Do you have
I'm just paying attention, and I don't have much to say at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, no more questions? Then we open it up to public comment on this issue. Honorable Bill.
And Brian, I probably could answer some of your questions. I would be happy to address any questions you may have regarding the submittal for the Ramsey property. I am a co-developer. The only comments I would like to make is that Oregon Housing's submittal process will require the energy efficient property to meet application standards. And there's basically 3 paths for energy efficiency. And you have to choose one of them. We will choose the most stringent. We do not do LEED certifications for the simple reasons you spend about $45,000 to $50,000 to get a plaque to hang on the wall. It really means nothing. The project will have, of course, an architect, civil engineer, structural engineer. We are contracting with the Osland Group here locally. I brought in Josephine Housing Council as a partner, and I'm sure Tammy can speak to you about that issue. There's going to be 35 units that have rental assistance through their agency. So 50% of the units. I used to tell Valerie when we do these projects that inspection time, there's so many inspectors that they normally outnumber the workers on the job. There's architects, there's civil engineers, there's structural engineers, there's an engineer that represents the state of Oregon, there's a tax credit inspector, there's a city inspectors. They are well-inspected projects. The biggest deal is truly the 35 rental assistance vouchers that will be assigned to that project. That means people can live there that literally pay a zero rent out of pocket. Brian, your questions were?
My questions were about the first one being senior housing, and then this one is not.
Well, I own 216 units of senior housing in Grants Pass. They're all subsidized. Most of my projects have a 3 to 5 year waiting list, just for informational purposes. We have mixed units because you also need workforce housing. You also have a number of people who are single people who need a 1-bedroom. There are no 1-bedrooms available in our community. They just don't exist for a normal working young person. Your other question was about the loan back. The reason for that, to be very honest with you, is when all the projects that get submitted to the state for funding for tax credit purposes, they get evaluated based on the fact this local jurisdiction, meaning the city of Grants Pass, is a participant in the project. That will get us added points to get funded. The funding normally is 3 to 1, 4 to 1 oversubscribed. For every project that gets funded, there are 3 or 4 in that application year that do not get funded. Myself and Crispin Development, since 1980 in rural Oregon, cities like Grants Pass, Lebanon, on the coast, we have 87 projects between us that have been funded. We average a couple a year. Last year we had 3 funded. So I tried to put together a team that would make this happen for Grants Pass. I'm a minor player because I'm semi-retired. And the only reason I came out of retirement to do this was I want to see those units in our community. Any other questions? How tax credits work? Tax credits work by, to be honest with you, my project on the corner of D and Anderson. The tax credit buyer was Ford Motor Company. Jasmine Park on Anderson Street. The taxpayer buyer was American Express. Why do they buy tax credits? To offset taxes. It's totally a federally funded thing. It really replaced HUD funding to build projects. HUD don't do loans anymore for multifamily. Rural development doesn't do loans anymore for multifamily. I did the very last one in Oregon in Brookings in 2012. Total development cost about $15 million. Anything else? Thank you.
Bill, I was
Brian?
you're much more knowledgeable in this area than I, but I did receive an email from a constituent that talks about the Department of Energy has set aside $2.5 million for solar installations on low-income housing projects, and the application period opens in January. So.
Pardon me, I didn't get your question.
Oh, well, I was just letting you know that the state is opening up $2.5 million for solar installations on low-income housing projects starting in January.
If the siding works and the architectural works, that's a very big possibility.
Thank you, Bill. Any other public comments? It's kind of nice to have public awareness, isn't it? that know what they're doing. Okay, comes back to the council for discussion. Any discussion? Rick?
I'd like to make a motion. I move to approve the resolution awarding the request for proposals to develop affordable housing on surplus real property known as Southwest Ramsey Avenue property to Chrisman Development Incorporated.
Got a second by Brian. Rick, how do you vote?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Oh, discussions. Thank you, Vanessa. Is it okay if you do the consent agenda today? I should have asked you ahead of time.
Sure. I just
Okay.
want to make sure we have
Okay,
discussion
any
on this.
discussion on the motion? Okay, Rick?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I vote yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, the council has passed the request for proposals to award that to Christian Development. With that, we got some loan negotiations ahead of us to incentivize the project by showing some city involvement. And there might be some solar grants available, Bill, that your architect could hopefully make things even better. It's exciting. It's exciting. Okay, public comment. People have been very patient. Go ahead, Bill. Yeah, make it quick. Public comment? Is that what you, okay, I got to read something first. I'm sorry. Well, public comment, first off, thank you for coming for public comment. It's an opportunity for the public to address the city council on items not related to a public hearing or council action item. Intent is to provide information that is pertinent to our jurisdiction. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the council as one body, not to any individual. At the conclusion of the public comment, council will have an opportunity to respond. Meeting will proceed, and I have no qualms about that, in an effective and courteous manner. Citizens and council members will be allowed to state their positions in an atmosphere free from slander, threats, or other personal attacks. Signs or placards, outbursts of applause, campaigning for public office, other disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. And if you have a question regarding any government-provided service or a current city policy, contact Aaron in an attempt to resolve the matter. Go ahead, Bill.
William Lovelace, 802 Northeast Oregon Avenue. I would like to thank the mayor and the council for your service in 2021. Wish you the very best Christmas and New Year. I would also like to thank the city staff for your service to our community. I have a special thank you for the police and fire department for your excellent professional service to our community. I interact with 5 other police and fire departments, and ours is truly the best. In this state of Oregon, I would rank Lebanon second, and you happen to have just hired a fire chief from there. Some of the council may ask why I stand before you on many issues and have for the last 40 years, because sometimes I believe it's easy for the council to get lost in the process, personal agendas, city manager agendas, and not look at the issues from business perspective and everyday citizen perspective. I truly love Grants Pass and will continue to advocate for the citizens. I truly believe that our nation and our community are built in a way no other nation on earth has ever been built. That our individual liberty and capitalism, we are the luckiest people on earth to live in this great nation. Most giving nation on earth, we help more people on this planet than any other nation. Over the last 235 years, have we made a mistake or two? Yes, we have. But we are still the best nation on earth. And that is why still to this day, people from around the world want to immigrate here. As a 5th generation Oregonian, I am truly embarrassed currently with our state government. Oregon has shoved mental health and drug problems onto you. The progressive issues at the state level are killing the state of Oregon. I used to brag to other people when I sat on state boards and national boards for the Home Builders Association about our community. The history of city government and community groups is amazing, and that is where we need to return. Foundry Village is a great example, but also the All Sports Park, Morrison Park, gazebos in the Riverside Park, Little League fields on Williams Highway, the high school football stadium, the high school softball field, all the turf fields in the city and the county. These are models that work, not by alienating your business community, by taxing select groups of people. You destroy your relationship with the business community, you destroy your community. You destroy your relationship with the community. Please don't let that happen to our city. Thank you and God bless.
Okay, I think that's the only public comment we have for tonight. We have emails. Julie, do you have emails for us?
Yes, you received an email with a proposal to use ARPA funds to make improvements to fields and scoreboards at Reinhardt Park. And you also received an email about a new dispensary opening in Grants Pass.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the council. Are there any comments on public comment this meeting? Brian.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on that email regarding the dispensary that we received. I don't know if staff has seen that email, but I just wanted to make sure that that dispensary went through whatever process it needs to go through. And Aaron?
Yes, and I'll have a council memo out to you tomorrow on that, just to provide you the details in response to that email.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Vanessa, can you read for us the consent agenda? And I guess we have one presentation on that. You want to do that before the reading or after the reading?
Yeah, I think we're going to do that
You
before.
should do it beforehand.
Oh, okay, so then we're going to have a short presentation.
By Adam Schultz.
By Adam Schultz. Adam, Honorable Adam, a resolution amending the comprehensive fee schedule for annual cost of living index adjustments. Go ahead, Adam.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you. We might need to right-click on my image and mark me as the highlighted or the spotlighted speaker.
Yeah, easy.
There we go. So as you said, I've got a presentation tonight on the resolution amending the comprehensive fee schedule for the annual cost of living index. Let's see, get to my notes. There we go. All right, so the subject and summary for the annual CPI adjustments is that this resolution amends our comprehensive fee schedule effective January 1st of 2022 to acknowledge the CPI-based annual cost of living index adjustments. This supports Council's goals of leadership by effectively managing and communicating the fees and charges of the city by maintaining fiscal health of the city. To give you some background on this annual CPI adjustment, first of all, CPI stands for Consumer Price Index, and the U at the end of that stands for urban. We use the Consumer Price Index, Urban Index, for our CPI adjustments and have for decades. Council acknowledges the comprehensive fee schedule on an annual basis, but also multiple times during the year if adjustments are needed. I believe one of the answers to Councilor Lovelace's questions was that there are various ordinances or resolutions that specifically dictate how certain fees are supposed to be increased, most of which are based on the CPI adjustment. Others may be based on schedules, which I'll give an example of that in just a second. These annual changes happen each January 1st based on the average monthly CPI-U for the period of November through October. So for 2022, we're using November of 2020 through October of 2021. For some more background, automatic inflation adjustments are applied to all of the main city utility user rates, to SDCs, and to many, but not all, of the planning and engineering fees. This year's CPI adjustment is based on the published monthly CPI-U changes, which is 3.77%. The chart below shows you the monthly CPI increases over the same month next year. So you can see November of, well, we'll use October as an example. October 2021 had an increase of 6.2% over the CPI-U from October of 2020. But if you take all of these monthly changes and get that average, that's where you get the 3.77%, which is what we apply to the comprehensive fee schedule. The red line you see is just to foreshadow some potentially unfortunate news that inflation is quite high, and you can see that the last several months of this year that we have used increase up to 6.2%. In fact, the CPI-U increase for November, which is 1 month after the chart that you see here, was 6.8. That is the highest highest increase we've seen since 1982. So unfortunately, alarmingly high CPI increases. I did want to point out, though, that the reason that we use the average is so that we don't inappropriately overreact to certain changes, because everything ebbs and flows. As you can see, the beginning of the period was quite low as far as CPI increases go at 1.2%. So we wouldn't want to punish our customers or penalize our customers by increasing all the way to 6.2% just because that's what the snapshot was as of October. So it kind of gives us a more smooth transition in our increases to our fees over time. Let's see. Some notable changes to the comprehensive fee schedule that you may have recognized is there are some additional parks fees, and that is because our contract with Rec Northwest ended, and we brought that in-house, which gave us the opportunity to really dive deep into the details of our park fees. So we've added some additional detail. These were fees that we were already charging and collecting for. We just hadn't quite got them added to the comprehensive fee schedule now. But they're there now. So thank you to Julia for finding those and getting those input. Another notable change would be for our water usage rates. It's been a big topic of conversation this year. And what you'll see is that we have only implemented the 3.77 CPI-U increase. It would have been 3.77% plus the 5.28% according to the fee increase schedule that was adopted with Resolution 18-6735 back in 2018. By not implementing that 5.28%, that's average monthly savings to an average household of $6.82, which is an annual savings of $81.81. Just to add one more piece of detail to that, if both the 3.77% and the 5.28% had been implemented, it would have been an increase of $140 per year on average. So we're definitely able to pass on some savings with contributions from the Urban Renewal Agency and from ARPA funds. A side note to that would be the water treatment plant replacement fee has increased exactly according to schedule as presented in that same resolution from 2018. One requested correction to the council packet on your Exhibit A under administration, which is actually on page 1, and I provided a corrected copy for you as the last page of the PowerPoint presentation. You'll see in your copy that you've been provided highlighted comprehensive annual financial report, and what we've discovered is that that acronym sounds like a very offensive slur in South Africa. So the Government Finance Officers Association has directed all organizations to discontinue use of that, and instead we'll be using Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or ACFR, or ACFR. Not sure how well that acronym will catch on. It doesn't quite roll off the tongue the same, but nevertheless, we'd like to change that in the comprehensive fee schedule to get that corrected as well. There is no cost implication for the implementation of these fee increases. Your call to action is that it's recommended for Council to adopt the resolution amending the comprehensive fee schedule with that correction to page 1 to acknowledge the annual cost of living index adjustments. The call to action is today, and your alternatives are that Council does have the discretion to amend most of the fees. However, like I mentioned before, if they're set by ordinance or resolution, it might take a more official action to be able to change those, but we can do that at any point throughout the year. And with that, my presentation is complete, so I can take any questions or turn it back over to Council.
Any questions for Adam? Valerie?
I just first of all want to say thank you, Adam. It's nice to see you, and I do appreciate you coming forth. And you know I've always felt about that that this needs to be transparent, and that's why I always feel that anytime we do something like this, we need to be open and honest about it, and totally understand it, so that when we get the questions down the road. So I have a question. You said on the parks fee, the Northwest contract ended. It was brought in town, so I'm assuming the additional detail and existing fees is in our packet, and I didn't look for it specifically, so we've just fine-tuned those fees that maybe we didn't have before in-house because they were being taken care of by Recreation Northwest. Is that correct?
That's correct. You'd have to look at this draft of the comprehensive fee schedule and compare it to a prior copy to see those additional fees, but they're not new fees. They're fees that have been charged all along. We just wanted to make sure that they got placed on the schedule.
Okay, thank you. And then I was a little bit unclear because you mentioned urban renewal funds being used also in the water. I do know that
just to clarify, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I understand that $3 million that we put for ARPA funding was took away the 528. Am I correct? That's where the 528 came from. And by using the ARPA funding, we took away that amount of money, which just left us with the CPIU, correct?
Excuse me, the ARPA funding was definitely part of it. The fee schedule that was adopted in 2018 did not take into account the amount of funds that the Urban Renewal Agency would be able to contribute. If you remember the Urban Renewal Agency, it's that 18% of the debt service for the water treatment plant can be paid for by the Urban Renewal Agency as well. So that's the other thing that we took into account when presenting to council the option to eliminate both of the remaining 5.28% water usage rate increases. So it's a two-part adjustment, or there's two pieces that make up our ability to do that adjustment.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies that. And then I just had one more question, because I know that at one point in time, we had set aside funds for people who needed help with their utilities and their water, and I'm assuming that is still in place, that we do set aside a set of money, and at this point in time, it does go, I think we give it to River Valley or one of the churches to help people that if they're having a difficult time paying their water bill, they can go and get some funding. So I just wanted to make that clear. So thank you, Adam.
Any additional questions? Does anybody object to keeping this item on the consent agenda? No? Okay. We're going to move on then, and Vanessa, could you read for us the consent agenda?
Item A, resolution amending the comprehensive fee schedule for annual cost of living index adjustments. Item B, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 3-year enterprise license agreement with ESRI for GIS software and maintenance. Item C, resolution authorizing the city of Grants Pass to enter into a settlement in the National Prescription Opiate Litigation, NPOL. Item D, motion approving the minutes of the City Council meeting of December 1st, 2021.
Any discussion or motions? Go ahead, Vanessa.
I did want to make a quick statement on item C, resolution authorizing the City of Grants Pass to enter into a settlement agreement, the National Opiate Prescription Litigation. And it's not my intention to downplay the magnitude of the settlement agreement we're entering into this evening. I do believe that this is a step in the right direction. And we do know that the opioid crisis has absolutely ravaged communities across our country for decades, and rural communities arguably have been hit the hardest. It's estimated that 136 Americans die every day from the opioid crisis, and that's based on annual death counts from last year. 80% of people who use heroin first misused prescription opioids. So the next time that you hear of someone in our community who suffers from substance abuse with heroin, please remember this context, that there is a likelihood they are victims of these exact predatory and deceitful practices from the institutions named in this settlement. Although I'm happy to be a part of this settlement and I'm relieved to see judicial ramifications brought forward, I would prefer those at the highest levels responsible for this crisis to be held criminally responsible and subject to jury trials, ultimately leading to time served in prison. I look forward to working with community partners affected and those most knowledgeable on this crisis with these received funds to help remedy some of the destruction from the crisis here in our community.
Thank you, Vanessa.
I'm going to just go ahead and make a motion that we accept the consent agenda.
Okay, is there a second to that? Brian and Rob both seconded it. We got a third. Vanessa, or Valerie, how do you vote?
Yes.
DJ, how do you vote?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Brian?
Thank you for your statement, Vanessa. I concur, and yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Okay. Last item we have is, last item we have before we adjourn is the matters from mayor, council, and staff. So mayor and council, our mayor is not here. So council, do you have any comments? Valerie?
Yes, I do have something that needs to come forward. We have some citizens who live out in Blackberry Glen in the southwest part of the city who want to annex in. They have service agreements, and the way that this has been a journey learning this annexation process, and I didn't realize that there's only like 300 and some acres were annexed in 2014, but there's over 800 acres in the urban growth boundary that have not been annexed in. So there are numbers of people out there who have service agreements. They pay the same amount of taxes as through the service, so they pay for police and fire, and they pay for the levy, but they don't have the right to vote. So in order to get that right to vote, they need to be annexed in. And there's two ways to get annexed. One of them is to have them come forward, and the other is to have us push for them and let the city know that they need to start going through the process that needs to happen to get them annexed in. And this particular group of people have all the pieces together, and they want it to happen. And so at this point, I would like to have the council give the lead to the city to start to proceed on the annexation for this group of people. Yes, Brian?
Well, I was just curious. I don't know how this process works, but wouldn't they just bring whatever paperwork needs to be done to staff, and staff would just process that?
They have to do it at the direction of the council, and that's the trip that we are right now, is that they would rather have the council tell the city to give them that, if I understand it correctly, because I have been working with somebody on it, and that's kind of where we were at.
Yeah. So we can get in contact, I'm sure Brad and I have talked briefly about this, but so if it's an owner-initiated annexation, I believe that annexation, there's a couple of different annexations, but that one annexation based on new legislation would trump our charter's requirement for a citywide vote.
Yes,
So in that situation, if it is what we're talking about, then we'll get to coordinate with them, and it's them that just needs to take the initiative to start the annexation process if it's one of those type of annexations.
Okay. Does that make sense, Brad? Because we've been going back and forth on this, and that was very kind of unclear. We knew it didn't have to go through the charter for the vote, but it was kind of our read that we needed to give the city the authority to move forward. So.
They can always request it, they can apply for it, really kind of like a land use action like you apply for. In order for them to bypass the voter requirement, they have to be either if it's one lot being petitioned, it has to be contiguous with city limits. However, properties could come in that are non-contiguous so long as they come in as a contiguous group, and at least one parcel that's part of that group is contiguous.
Yes, and we do know all of those things. We have gone through this whole process, but it's been a kind of a tripping point as to whether the council needed to initiate it or they needed to initiate it. So they just asked if we would initiate it to get the city working on it. So I just want to make sure that we all know that yes, they've done their part. We want them to come in and have that right to vote. So we'll have the city move forward.
Any other comments from council? Brian?
Yeah, I was just wondering if maybe we could get either an email or a brief memo on the results of the year at Caveman Pool, as far as, expenditures, revenues, number of guests visited, number of days open, just whatever statistics are available for the year at Caveman Pool. I think it'd be good for us to have that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I wonder if we could have that as part of our presentation that we're having on the funding of Caveman Pool. Does that make sense?
So we can incorporate it into that presentation, or we can do a memo, or either one, whatever council desires.
Whatever's easier for you guys is fine.
Yeah, I think a memo. I just wanted to be clear. So are you talking about just this prior year? Because are you looking for a traditional year or the prior year? Because the traditional year statistics will be very different.
Sure. I was more curious about this specific year.
This specific year, okay.
But if you would like to provide the prior year for context, that would be fine too.
Okay, you bet. We'll get that.
I'm going to be quiet till we get more comments. Valerie?
Yeah, I'm just going to make a comment and make it, I think I've talked to some of you about that tomorrow afternoon. Wear your snowsuit because we are having a tree planting. The Gateway Rotary has provided a grant to buy 15 trees, and we will be planting them tomorrow afternoon up at Beacon Hill Park between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock. And the Parks Department will be there. Urban Forester Tony Meekum will be there to get those trees planted. So it's kind of a celebration of what's to come.
DJ, there's some silence here if you want to make a comment. I don't know if I can wait 10 seconds. It's hard. It's hard. Are there any comments from staff?
I have one comment. The Oregon legislature held a special session on Monday. As many of you probably know, and I think there may have been an email that went around, but a part of that special session, which included the passage of Senate Bill 5561, is an affordable housing element. The bill included $1 million designated for Grants Pass, which was part of a $14 million allocation to all of the community development block grant entitlement cities in Oregon. So at least the brief thing that I read, it looked like rather than trying to look at population-based allocations, they just decided we're just going to give $1 million to everybody, whether you're Portland or Grants Pass. So that's good news. It appears from the League of Oregon Cities assessment that it does not, it's fairly open-ended. There's not a lot in that bill other than it is tied to affordable housing and addressing homelessness. So over the next couple of months, there's going to be a little bit of more guidance provided, and then estimate being in 3 to 4 months, it'll become available. And so we'll be working with you to get that on a workshop to talk more about. Just want to give you a heads up.
2 super quick items. There was a pretty big power failure on the south end of town. I'm sure you guys all saw it and hopefully didn't get caught up in it as all of the traffic signals were out from G to the river. It was pretty messy in town in the morning. What I did want to let you know though is that our emergency planning is very, very successful. Generators at the wastewater plant fired up and took over the load without spilling any sewage into the river. We ran on the generators all day there. At the water plant, they were able to mobilize a towing company very quickly to get the generator moved to the front of the plant, connected to the building, and also ran the water plant all day on generator power. So it was very good. And the other one is, this is our last meeting for the year. Happy holidays to all of you guys. I hope you have a great time with your friends and family.
Before we get a motion for adjournment, I just thought of the words of Tiny Tim. God bless us, everyone. And Do we have a motion for adjournment?
I move that we adjourn.
Do we have it, does anybody object if we adjourn? No? No, okay. Meeting's adjourned.
Am I the only one that's concerned that we voted on water rates and Rika's not here? I think we should request a welfare check.